After an extended break, we wanted to take a little mini vacation from the podcast. We are back with a vengeance. This is North Left Sports Podcast. Josh and Kyle here, and we're going to jump headfirst into the NFL Draft. This is going to be a two-parter, and we're going to start this off by talking about some of the big prospect quandaries and talking points that you may have heard about on television on ESPN, and we're going to, state our thoughts and then bring up some of the more unheralded prospects you may not have heard about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the most important position in the NFL, quarterback. And obviously everyone knows the big three names, Johnny Manziel, Blake Bortles, and Teddy Bridgewater. Kyle, what are your thoughts on the quote-unquote big three at quarterback?
I think that Teddy Bridgewater leads this class. He's a sensationally gifted quarterback from the shoulders up. He does lack some accuracy, and the fact that he wears gloves seems to have messed with some scouts' heads. So there's really a big question mark as to where he's going to fall in the draft now. Blake Bortles, ideal size. Johnny Manziel, not a prospect that would really be considered very high a couple years ago, but because of the increase of importance in spreading a defense out and being able to run multiple schemes, he's now in that conversation. As far as how I feel about these quarterbacks, I feel TV should be the first selected. I view him as worthy of a top 15 pick. I also view Blake Bortles as worthy of a top 35 pick, but I do not see Manziel worth a top 40 pick. So to me, he lies post top 40 in this draft specifically.
This is where we differ a little bit because I think Johnny Football is the best quarterback prospect in the class. But for me, that comes with the caveat that I think that all three prospects are around the 20 to 30 range. I think they all have gaps and issues within their own strengths and weaknesses. They aren't elite prospects in my mind, regardless of position, and especially for quarterback. In a draft this deep on other important positions like left tackle and pass rusher and pass catcher and defensive back, they shouldn't get bumped up as much as they would in a weaker draft, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I would go Johnny Football number one. And to bring up a different point in my, bold claim at the quarterback position / prospect on the lookout for me is I believe that Derek Carr, the quarterback out of Fresno State, is actually my second best quarterback in this draft. Dude has a cannon for an arm. Now, he did play in a very pass-happy system, and that's why his numbers look out of this world. But out of all the top prospects in this draft, he has, without question, the best arm. And I think the perfect comparison for him is Jay Cutler. And in this draft, Jay Cutler would definitely be a top 10 pick.
Agreed. Some of the more polarizing top candidates have been Jimmy Garoppolo, Zach Mettenberger. We've seen a lot of Aaron Murray love lately, David Fales. But one of the guys who I really like is Brett Smith from Western Virginia University, or Wyoming, excuse me. I think he's got everything you look for: size, speed, strength, but at the quarterback position. I think he's proved that he can make the throws. He's a 21-year-old kid, which means you're getting a project, which is nice. I like his ceiling going forward, and I think that I also am pretty sold on Taj Boyd as like a 5th or 6th round draft pick. I think that he's eerily similar to Tyrod Taylor with a way bigger arm, in my opinion, and I also think that he's got a really good head on his shoulders. Everything I've ever heard about his character is really positive. So there's going to be a lot of tantalizing quarterbacks in this draft. I'm with you, though. I do believe in Derek Carr. I think he's going to be a good quarterback. It really depends on the situation for him, too, like it does most quarterbacks.
Right.
A scheme fit's going to be very important for this draft specifically. And so moving along from the quarterbacks, or unless there's anybody else you want to
I have some follow-up questions. Let's not jump the gun. Let the host here.
Okay.
All right. Where would you draft Brett Smith?
I personally would draft Brett Smith because of where I feel like the quarterbacks are in this draft, and the fact that there's probably like 5 to 7 teams that really need a quarterback at this point. It's not that many teams anymore. A lot of teams have like a guy that they're somewhat invested into for another like year or two, but that obviously changes yearly. I think that I would draft Brett Smith I'd draft this guy in the 6th round.
Okay.
I think he's worth not letting get to the 7th, but I don't think he's worth taking before that because he's a total risk pick.
I agree with you very much so, and I would also say that I would take Taj Boyd above Brett Smith. Now, you brought up both of them. Where would you take Boyd in front of Smith or behind him? Or around the same area, they're very close to you?
If I'm a team that actually needs a backup quarterback, I take Taj Boyd. If I'm a team that needs a 3rd-string quarterback to develop, I take Brett Smith.
Who do you pick? You have to pick one.
Well,
who do you have ranked higher? Who do you have more faith in?
I have more faith in Brett Smith long term, but I also have more faith that Taj Boyd could step in from day one and do the job better.
Okay.
So so that's where draft rankings come in and they start to get really misconstrued. Because I have Brett Smith as the overall better player, potential-wise, but I feel like Taj Boyd's ceiling is low, or his floor is higher.
Right.
See,
we agree on the Taj Boyd thing, and before the Seahawks traded for Terrell Pryor today, I thought that would be a very good landing spot for Taj Boyd because he can do similar things to Russell Wilson. And now that they have traded for Pryor, I highly doubt they'll draft a quarterback, and I think they're going to keep Pryor as the main backup because he can emulate athletically what Russell does. Obviously, he's not the player Russell is. That's without question. But I feel like Brett Smith kind of falls into the New England Patriots, Dallas Cowboys, San Diego Chargers type category where they have a proven starter who's going to be there for 2-3 years, but they can kind of give their backup time. Whereas Taj Boyd should go to a team like a Arizona, for instance, who has an aging starter who they might need someone who could get hurt, can step in and be productive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he'll go to Arizona because he isn't a good fit for what Bruce Arians likes to do for the most part.
Right.
That's more of a Derek Carr pick / Tom Savage, who's another player I'd like to bring up. Tom Savage is getting a lot of love. He's getting double the love that Jimmy Garoppolo is getting right at the start of the process. So, Garoppolo or Tom Savage?
I would take Garoppolo.
I
He's
agree
much
with
younger. He gets the ball out much quicker. Savage is an intriguing prospect because of his size and arm strength ratio. But at the same time, he's like 24 years old already. We've already kind of seen he's transferred to 3 different schools. There's mobility issues with him. It's just not necessarily the type of guy you want to pick. You want to bring in as undrafted free agent and kind of see how dedicated he is to the game of football.
So, are you in agreement with me that Tom Savage could be one of the most overdrafted players in this draft?
Overrated or overdrafted, or both going
Both.
into it? Okay,
I specifically overdrafted.
I think the media is putting him in a spot that he's not going to go right now. But honestly, if he gets drafted in the 3rd round, or if he gets drafted anywhere above the 7th round or 6th round, then he is a complete and total reach.
Tom Savage will be drafted in the 3rd round or above. I'm 100% convinced of that.
Pathetic.
I think that he'll get drafted above similarly ranked players like Zach Mettenberger, Aaron Murray, David Falls even. I'm not a fan of Tom Savage. I just think he's too old, which is something that Kyle brought up. And I'm just not a fan of his. They talk about the lack of talent he had at Pittsburgh, and they had a horrible mind, but at the same time, he didn't elevate anyone. He didn't make anyone look good.
Watching Devin Street tape is miserable because of Tom Savage.
Yeah, it's an issue.
That's bad. When you're watching a wide receiver prospect and you can't tell how good he is because the quarterback's not getting the ball in rhythm, tells you pretty much what you need to know.
Yeah, so moving on to maybe the second biggest talking point of the draft, if not the first, depending on your perspective, the defensive line. And let's just start off really quick and get this out of the way specifically before we talk about hidden prospects, hidden gems, the more pass rushing ends, the 3-4, the 4-3, things like that. Clowney, would you take him number 1 if you were Houston?
If I was Houston, I absolutely would. Because I think the most indefensible thing in the league right now is a proven defensive line. I think that Seattle showed it. Obviously, they do it by committee, but having a dominant defensive line just opens up so many doors for the rest of your entire team. You can build around, the rest of your team pretty much. Like, you don't have to sit there and bank on corners and safeties and linebackers to be really good. You know, I don't know. I just feel like it out of all the positions, having a really good defensive lineman changes everything else on the defense. Whereas having a really good linebacker, if he's still getting guards on the second level, I mean, he's gonna get eaten up no matter what. I mean,
Yeah, I agree with
unless
you.
he's incredibly gifted, you know, but that just doesn't happen very often at linebacker.
Yeah, I would take Clowney one. It is a little bit worrisome to overload just one specific area with all your high draft picks. I mean, Greg Robinson should be in the conversation for me, but I would still go Clowney because having Watt and Clowney on the ends of a 3-4 in terms of just if you let your team get into a 3rd and 12 against those two,
Yeah.
good luck.
Yeah.
I mean, good luck.
Good
It's
luck
going to be
running
rough.
on either side too.
Yeah,
I mean,
especially Watt's the best defensive player in the league, and
Yeah.
Clowney has the most talent of maybe anyone who's entered the league defensively in 10 years.
and Clowney can play multiple positions.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like you
I
could
mean,
run him on a linebacker, you could run him as a defensive end, you could run him
Yeah.
on DT. It's up to you on any given down what you
yeah,
want to do with
I
him.
would definitely mainly stick him at 3-4 end. I would never put him at nose tackle unless it's a purely pass rushing situation.
Right, but you put
and
him
that
as
is
a DT and a nickel.
Potentially, yes,
Right.
but
For random.
linebacker would be interesting. Having him and Watt on the same side coming at the same time, which is something you've talked about a lot in
Yeah.
the past between us in conversation, is definitely an interesting option that any defensive coach would just drool about.
Yeah.
So moving on from Clowney, obviously we love him. Everyone loves him. If he were to fall out the top 5 somehow, it'd be insane. Like
it'd
I don't
be
know how that would happen, and I don't think it
earth-shattering.
will. So there's no way he gets past Jacksonville, in my opinion.
No. No, not at all.
Yeah. So
But moving along, we have some more polarizing
Yeah.
defensive end prospects.
after Clowney, who is your next best defensive lineman? Is it Aaron Donald, who's gotten a lot of love lately and dominated his senior year and in the
if we're
college all-star games at the combine, or is it someone who maybe has a lot of untapped potential, like Hegeman from Minnesota, or even someone like Khalil Mack who could potentially play, some end on a 4-3, although that he may be misutilized there. I think he's more of
Yeah.
just a pure outside linebacker. Is it Lewis Nix III who could potentially fill a nose tackle spot in a 3-4, which is very important and very valuable? So who do you have sitting at number 2 behind Clowney in the overall defensive line scheme of things?
Yeah, in the overall defensive line scheme of things, I have probably Aaron Donald, as you mentioned, as my second best player. Extremely fast off the snap, incredibly gifted as far as stopping the run, energy, motor, technique, skill, just all around great player. Outside of those two, and I'm not really going to consider Khalil Mack as a defensive lineman just for this conversation because he's got so much versatility that probably lump him in the outside linebacker range.
I completely agree.
But moving down the list is where it gets really interesting because this is kind of a deep draft in that there's a couple guys that you could get in the second round. And some of those guys are like a DeMarcus Lawrence, who's been being viewed as an outside linebacker potentially. Scott Crichton has a great size, speed, strength ratio with a high motor.
He'd be fantastic in a 4-3. Like in the second round to the New York Giants, I feel it could be a perfect fit
Yeah.
for him. He needs to go to that type of defense, in my opinion, to hit his peak.
I
He
agree.
needs to be a 4-3 end.
I agree. He's got that 6'3", 274 build. He's really strong at the point of attack. He's not known as an edge bender, but that's okay from a defensive end standpoint in the 4-3. Kareem Martin's been garnering a lot of interest because he's 6'6" and he's somewhat athletic, can bend off the edge, but also win with strength. Some of the guys that I'm a little bit more excited right now are, I mean, granted his knees hold up. I really like Dominic Easley out of Florida. I think that he dominated and was a key cog for their team and kind of made Floyd look really good last year. But back-to-back ACL injuries have really kind of derailed his potentially high draft status as a lock in the first round. I really like Coney Ealy. A lot of teams are dogging his skill right now, but his size to speed strength ratio is just incredible. He's got everything you need from wingspan to he had the same shuttle time as LaShawn McCoy. So he's got the strength, the speed, the versatility, and he's also only 21 years old, which really benefits him going forward or benefits the team that drafts him going forward. Are you a D Ford fan?
I
Do you believe in D Ford?
I do like D Ford a bit. I feel like a very interesting thing to watch moving forward throughout the years is Ely and Ford and see how they progress as players, because I feel like they're going to be drafted very close to each other. And they're very different.
They are.
Because D Ford is a lot more the athletic presence and blows you away with his speed, power combo, athletically off the edge, where Ely can work inside out, has more of the fundamentals behind him as defensive lineman and things of that nature.
Yeah,
And,
Ford kind of reminds me of Anthony Spencer in that way.
Yeah, where he could just have a random massive year.
Yeah.
Which, could be 4 years after he's drafted, and then he blows his ACL out the next year. But he could have, just a really great year one year where he gets 14 sacks.
Yeah, no, definitely. Some of the guys that I have that I really like as well are Marcus Smith from Louisville. I think he's awesome. He lined up in multiple schemes.
He's your favorite player in this draft.
I do love him.
You talk about him more than you talk about your dog.
I don't know if he's my favorite player in the draft, but he's definitely one of them. And the reason why is because of how creative he was used. I think that the Jets would be just insane not to draft this guy, because Rex Ryan
in the first round.
No,
okay,
in the second round. I don't think he's being talked about in the first round.
I've seen him at the end in a couple mocks, but not a lot of talk to think it actually happened. I
wouldn't I don't like him enough to take him in the first round because he doesn't have an actual position.
Right.
So that's the hardest part for me to actually consider him in that conversation, is he needs to have a position. But at 6'3", 250, he can do just about anything. Really smart football player. It's really rare to see a college football player so young asked that much of, and he definitely was. So, I mean, I think this guy's a good enough athlete that he could play strong safety if he wanted to. I mean, in college. I don't know about, in the pros, because who knows about how much weight you can gain or lose, but I just think he's a tremendous player. And also, I really like Kelsey Quarles from South Carolina. I don't think he got a lot of love because of Clowney, but he had 9 sacks, lined up on the outside and on the inside, as well as Kyrie Thornton, defensive tackle. I know you like Aaron Lynch from South Florida.
I love Aaron Lynch. This guy, as a freshman, was teammates with Louis Nix III and Stephen Tuitt and outplayed both of them all year. And then he came into some troubles and had a transfer, and he has so much talent. He is one of those guys where if he gets drafted in the right situation, gets his head on straight, he could be a top 5 player in this draft looking back. He's someone who could be a hidden gold mine. He has tons of talent, and he's very good and very athletic. And I wouldn't even be mad if San Diego drafted him, and he doesn't really even fit the 3-4 that well. I wouldn't even care because he's that talented.
Nice. And so where would you draft him then?
I would draft him anywhere in I feel like he'll go in the mid-second and up, and he'll be in between the 20th pick and like the 45th. I feel like he's going to fall in that range.
Oh wow!
That's really cool. I really think he's going to get drafted a lot higher than most of the mocks have him. And I kind of feel like you've been just throwing out tons of names, and I want to throw out just 2 names, and then I'll ask you some questions about the other linemen. Okay. I don't know how well he's going to be, but from just a pure size perspective, Dan McCullers, the defensive tackle out of Tennessee, is 6'6", 350 pounds. So I could easily see someone taking a 3rd, 4th round pick on him, a Pittsburgh, a Baltimore, a New England, a team that knows how to use those really big defensive tackles at the nose spot and just try to teach them to stand there and take up 2 offensive linemen and get value out of them that way. I feel like just based on size, he could get drafted a bit higher than people are thinking. I haven't heard any talk about him at all. He could be, in the 4th or 5th round, and people might wonder, why is this Tennessee defensive prospect getting drafted when they did nothing all year?
That's, and there's always going to be guys like that. So that's a really interesting. I was kind of viewing Brent Urban in a similar light. He's from Virginia, 6'7", 300 pounds, gives you a lot of size on the edge. And one guy, I know he got talked about for all the wrong reasons this year, but a guy I think some people are sleeping on is Michael Sam. I mean, let's not forget the tape here, people. This guy explodes off the edge, beat a lot of good tackles in college, and I think that he's being flagged as a one-trick pony when I don't think it's necessarily fair because there's a lot of prospects that you could do worse on. So hopefully he gets drafted. Is there anybody else on the defensive line that kind of jumps out? I know that, Will Clark is one of the ones for me, 6'6", 270. If he can add some bulk to his frame, really be a nice presence on the edge. There's a lot of defensive linemen.
There's a ton of them. If you have a 4-3 team in the 4th or 5th round, Zach Kerr, defensive tackle out of Delaware, where Joe Flacco went.
Yeah.
He could be a very interesting name. But
Will Sutton.
Yes, I was just going to say, and speaking of Will Sutton, in terms of the defensive prospects who could go 1st, 2nd round that have tons of talent and haven't really met it, do you believe in Aaron Lynch or Will Sutton more? Because we know who I believe in more.
I would draft Will Sutton higher.
Okay.
But I might believe in Aaron Lynch a little bit more.
Will Sutton or Dominique Easley?
I'd take Easley.
I do too.
I think he's got so much potential that if you're a team like New England, like Seattle, like San Francisco, that just stockpiles picks every year and just takes random guys that might not play for a while, that's the guy you want to take. I think he's a really solid defensive tackle.
Lewis Nix III or Timmy Jernigan out of Florida State?
I'd take Timmy Jernigan.
I agree. Lewis Nix III or Hegemon from Minnesota?
I'd take Hagman.
I'd take Hagman too.
I think that guy has a huge ceiling, but he has a really low floor.
Yes.
I think he could bust big time. I mean, he's already 24 years old, 6'6", got great size, could dominate the game if he wanted to.
Why didn't he do it? That's always my question when players have tons of potential. Like, at least with Aaron Lynch, you saw him dominate before.
Yeah.
We've never seen him, Rashad, dominate for, 4 or 5 games in a row.
No.
Yeah, Will Sutton did it 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Looked incredible.
That's...
Lewis Nix III did it in his freshman year with Aaron Lynch next to him and Tuitt. I'm not a Lewis Nix guy.
Yeah.
Lewis Nix or Tuitt from Notre Dame. I agree, Tuitt.
I mean, I still like that guy. If he's there in the 3rd round, I would be hard pressed not to take him. I mean, 6'6",
I don't think he's there in the 3rd round.
I don't think he is either, but that's what I'm saying. Like I'm not a fan of his game, but I could not turn down a 6'6", 300-pound body in the 3rd round. I mean,
agree.
Especially one that's been heralded talent like him throughout his career. I'd rather be the guy that missed on him than someone else.
Right.
Although I would have a hard time choosing between him and Kareem Martin. So.
I would probably take Tuitt over Martin, but
They're both really big. So
yeah.
I mean, it really depends. Do you need a defensive tackle, which I think Tuitt can do a little bit more than Martin?
Well, you can definitely move Tuitt around more than Martin.
Yeah.
So we brought him up earlier, Khalil Mack, far and away the best, linebacker in this class. Would you agree?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on from Khalil Mack then. Let's talk about a few of the other linebackers in this draft. My favorite linebacker besides Khalil Mack is Ryan Shazier from Ohio State. This dude oozes athleticism. He's one of the fastest linebackers I've ever seen.
Yeah, he's incredible.
He's really fast. He runs a 4.5, if not faster. He ran a 4.5 with a pulled hamstring at the pro day. But that's the issue. That guy gets hurt all the time. Going into the draft process, Anthony Barr was a potential top 5 pick, and now I'm hearing he could fall out of the 1st round.
Which is not true.
McShay and Kuiper both are not too fond of his game tape. McShay is definitely not a fan of Barr at this point. He's not sold on him at all, but I don't see any way you can pass on a guy with that much potential in the 1st round.
Yeah, no, that's all smokescreen. I don't believe a single shred of it. I think that he's a marquee talent. He's only been playing defense for 2 years. He's a beast on the edge. He's got every athletic tool you need. He's got great size, great strength. I mean, there's just no reason not to like him. The only thing you can dock him on is his technique. And you can improve that because he's shown that he wants to be a good football player.
If Dallas drafted him in the 1st round, would you be angry?
No. If Donald was on the board, yes.
If Aaron Donald's gone and all the other realistic possibilities are there and they drafted Barr, would you be okay with it?
I would love it. I would be more than happy to miss on a guy like Barr.
how big of a gap is there between C.J. Mosley and the next inside linebacker in this draft? Is it a round, 2 rounds, half a round? Is there a gap to you?
I think that there is at least a round difference. I think C.J. Mosley, actually, after watching a lot more of his tape, it warrants a late first-round pick. But he's not a top 15 prospect like a lot of these guys are saying. He's just not.
I feel like
maybe if he had everything going for him, you would say, okay, he's a top 15 prospect. But he's got way too much going against him, injury-wise.
Is that the only thing going against him? Because for me, that's my only concern with Mosley is injuries.
That and he gets swallowed up by blockers. So I mean, he's not as athletically gifted as Luke Kuechly, who was a top 10 pick. So
no one said he's a better prospect than Luke Kuechly.
Right, but so why would you take C.J. Mosley at 10 or 15 when Luke Kuechly is the prospect that's worth it at 8 and he doesn't even come close to measuring up to him physically? That's my problem. And he's got the injury concerns.
It's the safety of the pick, where if he stays healthy, you know he's going to be a starter for 10 years. Whereas if you take someone like Zach Martin, and he reaches his peak, at best he's a right tackle, and you don't even know if he's a starter in 5 years, and he's getting a ton of love, and that's just picking a guy at random. But I mean, I would take Mosley anywhere under 15 personally. I think he's really safe.
You'd need to have a middle linebacker, but I agree with you. He's a safe pick. Depending on I'd have to have value to justify the pick. There's too many good players in this draft that I'd rather have besides Mosley that I think are more of a slam dunk than him. Not at his position, and I give him that. But I'm not trying to pick a guy based off of disparity of position. I would still rather take a defensive line, even if I was already stacked there, knowing that I didn't have to re-sign somebody in the future, or you can rotate people, get their stats down, so you don't have to really pay them. There's a lot of different strategies for that. But that being said, he is the best pure coverage middle linebacker in the draft by far.
With the way that the NFL is expanding into more tight ends running routes and more intermediate first down type routes, don't you need that more than ever? And does that raise his value more than a linebacker like his status in the past would? Because I'm not saying that he's Kuechly, but if he was in a draft 20 years ago, he's not ranked as highly as he is now because of the way the NFL has changed. Agreed?
Agreed. But at the same time, a lot of those middle linebackers, he has to be the best coverage the best coverage linebacker on your team. Because if he's not in the nickel formation, then you're drafting a guy in the first round that's going to play first and second down for you. And I don't think that's a good pick.
Well, he's going to be your best coverage linebacker.
I would think he is. I don't think he's overly speedy, but I do like his fluidity. Like, I don't think he has a lot of wasted movement, and I think that's really important. That shows a really strong IQ there.
I think, like a lot of Alabama players, he's so expertly coached from Saban, especially defensive prospects from Alabama, that you don't have to teach him a lot when he gets to the NFL. I think your biggest concern with a lot of Alabama prospects, and you've seen this, is injuries and them looking better than they actually are because of the coaching and how loaded those teams are.
Yeah.
And I feel like this season and the top 2 prospects, Alabama, coming out defensively, Mosley and HaHa Clinton-Dix, are exceptions to the newest trend because they do certain specific things you need exceptionally well. And you can see that on tape, and you hear all the other draft pundits say that and agree. They all agree on those 2 players pretty much. They all say that they are the best inside linebacker and the best safety. And, when McClain came out, he was a very good prospect, and people forget about that. And he had so many off-the-field issues that pretty much derailed his career. And I don't like the comparison of McClain and Mosley.
Well, they're different players.
Exactly.
But I feel like they're equal prospects. So that kind of goes...
But McClain's problems are so much worse than Mosley's.
At this point, but going into the draft?
Going into the draft, I would still agree.
Yeah.
Because the biggest issue with Mosley is injuries.
Yeah, McClain...
The biggest issue with McClain was gang ties, violence, issues. It's, Alabama, and Mosley doesn't have any of that.
Some other linebackers I like, Chris Borland from Wisconsin.
Is he your second best inside linebacker? I agree with you 100%.
I've got Christian Jones next, and I just think that Borland's just got a killer mentality. I think I'd rather have Borland in the second or third than Mosley in the first. Just because I'd rather have a athletically gifted outside linebacker like a Telvin Smith in the third round that covers guys in my nickel formation and have two of those guys.
I wouldn't even draft Telvin Smith as a linebacker. I would immediately move him to safety and try to do the Cam Chancellor experiment.
That'd be a good idea.
That's what I would love to have Telvin Smith for. If San Diego got him in the third and moved him to safety, I would be so happy. Or if they kept him outside linebacker and just had him rush the quarterback.
He can play in a lot of positions.
Yeah,
too.
he's a very interesting name. Another name I'd like to throw out there is Atachu from Georgia Tech. I know you're a
Awesome.
big fan, so I'll let you take the floor with Atachu.
I just think that Atachu is still learning a lot about the football or the game of football. I think that he's got great technique, great motor, works hard, plays even harder. He's got a variety of skills that can be advanced at the next level, a lot of translatable skills. I also really like Kyle Van Noy. I really like Jordan Zumwalt as well as a 3rd to 5th round pick. And I think that Chris Smith from Arkansas has some good potential as well as a 4th to 6th rounder. So there's a couple different outside linebacker, middle linebacker types I like. But outside of that, I don't really see it as the most deepest class, especially when you've got guys like Jordan Tripp, from Montana possibly creeping into like 4th and 5th round picks. It just doesn't show depth of the position.
What about Kyle Van Noy out of BYU?
I love
He's
Van
getting
Noy.
a lot of love right now.
Love Van Noy. He's tenacious. He reacts well. I'd rather draft Van Noy over Mosley, even if there's as long as there's a 10 to 15 pick disparity there. Like if Mosley goes at 29, I'd rather have Van Noy at 41 or 42 than C.J. Mosley.
Okay, so we know where Kyle stands on C.J. Mosley. Basically does not want him on his team.
I would it'd have to go so well for me.
Would
to
it be
draft him.
weird if you drafted Mosley and he's immediately your most healthy linebacker?
I would not be mad. I would love it, honestly. I think that I love for players to succeed, and we talk about that all the time. Like, if it was up to us, every rookie would have a sweet season, and every team would be 8-8. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because every team would be that good. Like, it'd be awesome if everyone panned out like that. And I think that C.J. Mosley's definitely got that in him. But I'm too scarred from the Alabama defenses, and I'm way more sold on Dix than I am Mosley.
So Kyle's sold on Dix. Moving on from that, Sammy Watkins or Julio Jones?
I personally would take Sammy Watkins. Now, I know
Really?
it sounds crazy, but he's faster than Julio Jones, in my opinion. He explodes off the line better. He's more of a technique refinement guy. Doesn't have a lot of the injury concerns that Julio had in college. And there's really only 2 inches that Julio has on Watkins, and their verticals are pretty similar. So I really don't see, especially the routes that they've asked Julio to run, it doesn't seem like his height is really much of a factor. It's not like they're asking him to run on the sidelines and make contested catches. It's usually deep down the field. And I think that Watkins is a more explosive, faster athlete. And, I just think that the Watkins has just got that house potential.
Right.
Like, I don't think Jones ever had that house potential. He could never take it to the house. It just wasn't his MO. Despite being really fast and really talented. I don't know.
I would take Jones, but the health is such a huge issue with him because he's proven in college and the NFL that it's a legit concern every season, every game, every play.
Yeah.
So, Sammy Watkins or AJ Green? Let's just go down the line and see where it
AJ
stops.
Green with that question.
I
AJ
agree.
Green to me is one of the most elite wide receivers in football. I just don't think he
Is he
gets-
the second best receiver in the NFL?
No.
Assuming Megatron's first?
I don't think so. It's really, really hard conversation to have.
Right. I was just curious
I mean,
because
it's-
if he had a real quarterback, his numbers would be ungodly. Dalton cannot get him the ball
Yeah.
deep or he can dominate.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to say because, I'm trying not to be a homer here, but do you not think that if Dez Bryant was on like a team that was more focused on feeding their number one, that he wouldn't have way better stats?
But so would AJ Green if he could get the ball deep.
Right.
So-
But I think Dez can take it to the house more than AJ. So it's just kind of like
And
I
AJ
feel-
has better hands.
AJ has better hands, but doesn't get open as easily. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Is
I
that
see
because
this-
Andy Dalton can't make it into tight windows?
Maybe.
Yeah. It's interesting. Of course, I love Dez. You know I love Dez.
No, we both do.
But-
But I'd probably take AJ Green because he didn't have any of the off-field stuff. Not to mention AJ Green, he's got elite size.
Yeah.
I mean, he can jump as high as
Anyone. Megatron, pretty much.
Megatron,
Yep.
in my opinion.
So another wide receiver question: does the breakout year of Alshon Jeffrey bump up the value of Mike Evans and make people think he's better than he actually is because he can just win at the point of attack and you can just throw it up there and he'll catch it because he's so big?
Yes. I think Johnny Manziel had a lot to do with that because he has shown that he will scramble out and make crazy plays, and I feel like a lot of it he gets credit for it being premeditated, but I feel like a lot of it is Evans making him look good on tape. And part of that almost makes me wonder if Evans is as good as we think he is, because he benefits so much from Johnny running around. It's like they both benefit so much from it. Because I see a lot of times when Evans gets hit in stride, he tends to have mental lapses and drop it. Not every time, obviously, not quite as bad as Kelvin Benjamin, but yeah, to answer your question, I do think he's going to get rated a lot higher than he should, and he might be drafted in the top 15, which I wouldn't do in this draft, personally. I just wouldn't. So, I just think there's too much depth at wide receiver, and too many guys that I like in this specific draft that I wouldn't want to risk being the guy that missed with Mike Evans.
Since I've been, very closely following the NFL draft, this is the best wide receiver class I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's so deep. There's like 20 receivers that could get drafted in like the top 4 rounds. Like, it's insane. Like, they're all it wouldn't surprise me if just, even someone that isn't even potentially a top 10 prospect like Dante Moncrief ends up being the best receiver in this class. Because he has that type of potential.
Yeah, and he's so young. He's only 20 years old right now.
Or it wouldn't even surprise me if Martavius Bryant, the guy next to Sammy Watkins, is a top 5 receiver out of this draft and a potential Pro Bowler.
That wouldn't surprise me either.
There's so much speed and size and talent and wingspan and winning at the point of attack in this class. If you had to pick one receiver that you feel is underrated, who would it be?
That I think is just underrated is Jordan Matthews.
Okay.
I think he's got great size, decent speed. No one expected him to run a 4.48. 6'3", 220 pounds. Was the main wide receiver for Vanderbilt. Set a record for most catches in a season for his conference. I think that he's a tremendously gifted player. A lot of people will talk about, oddly enough, his lack of explosiveness and that he doesn't look like he's that fast. But to me, that says he's a fluid athlete. Like he just doesn't need to win with intense separation. He can win just doing what he does. And obviously, you know how I love Jarvis Landry. So.
Yep. My pick would have been Dante Moncrief, and that's why I brought him up. But I also want to mention really quickly another receiver that I really like, and I think he's being very underrated because of his size, and that's Jalen Sanders, the receiver out of Oklahoma. He's very small, 5'8", 170, but he just seems to me like a prototypical slot guy. You can't tell me that he can't do, what an Eddie Royal does or things of that nature. He could show a lot of value in the 5th and 6th round. And I think he'll get underdrafted because of his size as a receiver.
I didn't have him being drafted, so that's interesting. That's possible. I feel like if I were a team, I'd rather take a chance on like Mike Davis from Texas, who ran like a 4.41. But I mean, I see or even like a Michael Campano from Wake Forest, because he pretty much caught almost everything that was around him. But there's just so many wide receivers. Cody Lattimore is being talked about as a potential first-round pick. Kelvin Benjamin, first-round pick, potentially. We both really like Devontae Adams from Fresno State. It made Carr look really good this year. A lot of contested catches.
Odell Beckham Jr.
Yeah,
I love Odell Beckham Jr. Marquise Lee out of USC had a monster year 2 years ago. Last year struggled a bit, had no quarterback. He's still going to get picked in the first round.
Brandon Cooks.
That dude is awesome. I love watching that guy play, and whoever gets him is getting someone who's going to work his ass off.
Just the fact that he's like, the fourth or fifth round or fourth or fifth rated wide receiver, I feel like he's way better than Tavon Austin was last year.
Oh, I
And
agree.
he was a top
100%.
10 pick, so that just shows you how deep this draft is.
Yeah. Jordan
Really
Matthews
exciting.
out of Vanderbilt's really good. Paul Richardson out of Colorado is really good. Bruce Ellington out of South Carolina is really good.
See, that's like Dexter McCluster. He got drafted in the second round. Bruce Ellington is the type of guy I would try and take in the third or fourth round. I feel like is exactly what he is. You
And
know?
there's just one more receiver that I want to bring up because I feel like this whole podcast we've just been naming names, and I'm trying to get some questions in there that are a little bit more interesting. Brandon Coleman, wide receiver 6'6" out of Rutgers. Is he the type of guy that you would just pick as a project in the third round and just hope he's in the next Vincent Jackson?
I wouldn't take him in the third round, but at the same time, yes, he's that type of player. So you definitely want to take him in the fourth, fifth round. I think that's kind of a little bit rich, but I definitely could see a team like Seattle going for that. So,
Okay.
I mean, it always seems funny how there's like the certain teams drafting on this scale because they have too much talent and they're just going for the highest ceiling guys. And then there's also the teams that have like middling talent and are just hoping to land a couple of solid players. And there's, the Jaguars who are trying to land like
Whoever
every
they can
average player they can get, or
Yeah.
it's just. I'm not to say that's their mentality in a nutshell, but it's just funny how every team has a different drafting strategy.
All right, I kind of want to, get this more interesting, like I said, and so we're not just naming names the whole time. And I'm just going to start going with some quick fires and trying to find prospects that are similarly ranked, similar size, that could fill the same role for a team, perhaps. So, Darqueze Dennard or Jason Verrett?
I love Jason Verrett. Love his mentality. Love his speed. And I think that his skills are going to be highly translatable. I don't care that he's a little bit undersized. The guy wants contact. He seeks it out. And I think has shown great route anticipation. And the fact that he went to a really good school helps.
I really, really, really like Jason Verrett as well. He's my second-ranked corner, and the only reason he's not number one is just because of the size issues against guarding most NFL number ones. But he's going to work harder. He's going to tackle. He's going to love it. He wants to hit. He can cover his ass off. He's Brandon Flowers. He's Antoine Winfield. He's going to be a small corner that succeeds. It can, be a great corner in your team and a building block on a defense. So
Agreed.
I agree with that. Bradley Roby or Kyle Fuller.
Kyle Fuller. He's my number one rated cornerback. I love him. I think he's got great speed. He's got family pedigree. He's not afraid to tackle. And I think that Justin Gilbert could learn a couple things by watching his tape.
I will disagree with you a little bit. I will take Bradley Roby. I like Kyle Fuller as well. I think both will get drafted in the first round. I don't think there's a huge gap, but I think Roby's potential, if he just tightens up his technique, he could be a number one corner.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like Fuller's technique is already very sound, which limits his ceiling a little bit, but his floor is higher than Roby's, for sure.
Okay.
So they're very close to me, but I just kind of wanted to play devil's advocate when I can, when I think it's close.
Yeah, and Justin Gilbert obviously is a very talented cornerback
Yes.
who deserves to be in the top 2 or 3 ranked corners, but I just don't like his inability to really tackle and the fact that it just doesn't seem like football is the most important thing in the world to him. So
Right. Jake Matthews or Taylor Lewan out of Michigan, both tackles.
I take Matthews. He's my number 1 rated tackle. I love Robinson. I think he brings a lot of potential. Luan as well. He was off the charts as far as strength and speed ratings. But some of his off-the-field issues and Robinson's lack of technique and just overall use of just natural skill kind of scare me off from him. I'd rather just take Matthews and not have to worry about it.
Okay. I have Robinson as my number 1 tackle. I would take Matthews, and then I have Taylor. I think all 3 are in the top 10 picks without a question. They all should be top 10 picks with how important left tackle is.
Yeah.
So, my next question, Calvin Pryor or Jimmy Ward?
I would take Jimmy Ward because I would think you could get him a couple spots back, and I think he showed better anticipation Faster speed on the stretch routes where he's running one man up, and he's allowed to just kind of read the quarterback and pick a side and try and hit on the wide receivers. I think Calvin Pryor's a really good athlete and a talented player, but I think the big hits are getting him a little too highly talked about.
I agree.
For his actual skill set.
Right, I agree. The big hits could be bumping them up. It's always sexy to look at those type of things on the highlight tape and show that on NFL Insiders and things like that. I think they're both very good. I would rather have Jimmy Ward if I need a corner who can cover the back nine. I'd rather have Pryor if I needed someone playing in the box. That's my difference on the two, because Pryor definitely shows that he wants to tackle. He wants to be in run support. And Ward is definitely shown that he's very good at covering, deep outs and curls and making plays on the ball.
If I'm trying to draft safety in this draft, I am waiting because I want Deion Buchanan in the third round.
I love Deion Buchanan.
I think that
WSU representing the only prospect in their whole team that's going to get drafted. And he could be like the second safety in this draft drafted.
He could be, honestly.
I would probably say he's the fourth safety, but he's very good.
He's fast.
He could be the best value.
And,
he has great size too.
A guy that I also think if you're trying to draft safety in your team, you should be looking at is Vinny Sunseri. He's 6 months removed from injury. He's been looking good. I think that his recovery's been rather nice, and if I'm looking for a safety, he's got a good height to speed, size, strength ratio. Obviously comes from a football acumen college, and he'd be a guy I'm looking at to get some solid value out of in the fourth.
I think the safety class is very good. I mean, obviously you don't want to overdraft them. I've already brought up Telvin Smith. I think he'd be an incredible safety, but a couple other guys that in the later rounds I find very interesting. Craig Austin, the safety out of LSU, used to be talked about as a top, first, second round pick. Definitely fallen down the board, and I like to look at prospects like that who have fallen for just because of bad play when they've shown great play in the past.
Yeah,
I feel like he was a little bit exposed when those a lot of the great LSU defensive backs graduated. And they were very young this year, and he was trying to do too much.
Yeah,
I feel like that's getting him underrated. And maybe in the 6th, 7th round, or maybe he's an undrafted free agent. Des Southward, safety out of Wisconsin, shows very good size, and that Wisconsin's very well coached. Their defenses are always sound. Those teams are always good. He's ready to play. He would be a very good 3rd, 4th safety on your team if you needed some depth at that position.
Nice. So, I like that.
Your best running back in the draft.
That is tough.
If you were picking 30th, you need a running back. Your team can be power or stretch, and none of that matters. Who's the best running back in this draft? Quick. Off the top of your head.
I would probably take Carlos Hyde.
Okay.
If I had to take a guy, because he's got enough speed and enough strength. His speed is uncanny for his size.
Yeah.
And so that's why I would choose him. Is because I would think that he could run in between the tackles. He can also make zone read runs. But he's not that much ahead of Trey Mason.
Really? You have Mason second. Okay. I have Hyde first as well, and my second running back is just... we don't need to get... The running backs, it's so interesting.
Who do you have second?
I mean, I kind of just... you're putting me on the spot here, but I think that the second most productive running back will be Devontae Freeman.
Really?
Yeah.
I liked him, his speed, and, for his size and his weight distribution was interesting. I really like, I think Bishop Sankey's being completely overrated. Jeremy Hill's being overrated because of his...
I do not like Jeremy Hill at all.
No. But, I mean, if you needed a grader in the 5th or 6th round, that's a good pick.
I think he'll get drafted. I think he should get drafted. I just don't think he shouldn't be in the first 4 rounds.
I really like Andre Williams.
Boston College.
But he's just been hurt.
And he's a senior, too. And that's always with the running backs. They can come in and produce immediately, but... That's something that you need to consider is when you're trying to look for deep sleepers, especially running back, the younger they are, where they haven't hit their physical peak yet before they take the toll, something you should look at.
I love Terrence West. He's my 3rd ranked running back. I think he's awesome.
I prefer Isaiah Cromwell.
Really?
Yes.
I just don't know enough about his pass. Well, I have watched tape on him. And he's a very intriguing prospect. Very intriguing.
I loved him. I try to follow high school recruiting a little bit just to see who may be the big names. and he was a big time prospect that went to
Oh,
Georgia and
yeah.
got kicked off the team.
Yeah.
And I love those players. And then in college basketball too, I love, that's why I really like PJ Hairston, coming in from the D League in the draft this year. But Cromwell is another type like that where I like when, players have disciplinary issues, and then hopefully if they fix those and they dominate in the lower levels, that shows they still have that talent. And I feel like that translates.
I really like Charles Sims as well. And those were probably my favorite running backs if I had to pick them.
Okay. Blake Bortles or Johnny Manziel? This is a you-specific question.
I would take Blake Bortles. I'd rather be the guy that took the big QB prospect.
Right. And as I already said, Manziel is my number one quarterback, so there's my answer. Morgan Moses or Zach Martin?
I think Zach Martin's way more finished product than Morgan Moses. But if you needed a left tackle, I don't see Zach Martin ever being that type of player.
No, he's a right tackle.
So, or a really good guard. So I'd probably rather have Zach Martin.
I'm glad you said that, because I actually do not like that statement in general. I feel like it's a very overrated term when people say, like, well, if he can't go play left or right tackle, he's going to be incredible at guard. Not saying that you're wrong or that you're just saying that. I always hear that all the time.
Just assumed.
And my favorite example is Brian Bulaga.
Yeah.
They said that, if he can't play tackle, he's going to be an incredible guard. He can't play tackle, couldn't play guard when he went over there in injury replacement for Green Bay. And now he's trying to be tackle again. And they still haven't solved their tackle issues. And they've drafted him. They drafted, they should have signed Jamon Bushrod, so the Bears didn't sign him and spent some money. But that's a whole different discussion. And then DeMarcus Lawrence or Marcus Smith?
I take DeMarcus Lawrence.
I agree 100%.
I think his ceiling is so much higher. Only because edge pass rushers are at a premium.
Okay, and
I don't know if Marcus Smith bends as well. Marcus Smith's like one of those guys who'd be great as like a gap penetrator. Especially behind, like I'm saying, he would be perfect in New York. Because he'd have wide open lanes, and he's so smart that he'd be able to get through all of them.
Yep. And then the last question that I want to throw out there is Ryan Shazier or Anthony Barr?
I would take Anthony Barr, no injury concerns, elite athleticism, more versatility scheme-wise.
Okay.
I feel like Shazier's kind of limited as a 4-3 outside backer. Potentially 3-4 middle linebacker. But I just don't see him being a pass rusher. But then again, Ryan Kerrigan has done a pretty good job as an outside linebacker in a 3-4, and I think him and Shazier have similar traits.
Well, I think Shazier's way faster than Kerrigan.
He is,
and
but
Kerrigan has more bulk though as well, so it's very interesting.
It goes both ways.
And I feel like we've just thrown out probably 100 names.
Yeah.
Overall, but I want to give you a guy to end it with. You want to talk up, even if we've already talked about him, just to get your point across. And I recommend talking about someone you've already talked about to just get that final say that you love so and so. And then I'm going to end it, and then we're going to move on to part 2, which hopefully will be posted, in a few days. And we're going to do a mock draft. We're going to do it McShay Kyber style. Kyle's going to do the first pick. I'll do the second. He'll do the third. I'll do the fourth, and so on until we do the first round. And if there's one player you can end this podcast on, who are you going to end it on?
If I'm going to end this podcast on one player, that's really tough. So I'm going to go ahead and choose somebody who I feel like is going to make me sound very smart in the future, not somebody who's going to make me sound very stupid in the future. So the guy I really want to talk about is Marcus Smith. I just think that, I know I've already gushed about him, but I think in today's football, you need a player who can line up as a linebacker with speed, who can run off the edge as a linebacker, can line up at defensive line if you need him to, has the toughness to play in a defensive tackle, run up the field type position on third down. And I think that he's going to be the player when it's all said and done. As long as he goes to a creative mind, I think he's going to really make an impact and be a great player in this league for a long time.
Okay, and I'm going to mention a player that is in a positional group we didn't really mention at all, and I think he is the best of the group, and it is highly unfortunate that he just tore his ACL. And I'm talking about Gabe Jackson, the guard from Mississippi State.
Brandon Thomas too.
Yep, this guy is really good, and you mentioned Brandon Thomas, the guard out of Clemson, is very good as well. Gabe Jackson has never missed a game in college, and started every game all 4 seasons. His dad was a football coach. There's all these great things about him, and as a guard, it lessens the need for exceptional speed because you're playing on the inside and you just need quick bursts for pulling, and that's something he's absolutely fantastic at. He's a very good run blocker. His pass protection could use some work, but he could, in my opinion, be the best guard out of this draft.
I also really like Xavier Su'a-Filo. I think he's a tremendous guard. We never really got to the guards, but if you are looking out there for
Try
some
Turner,
guards to check
LSU.
out, yeah, Trey Turner, Dakota Dozier, Joel Bitiano, who actually is looking really good to translate to left tackle in the NFL.
Cyril Richardson was the former number 1 guard in this class. Had a bad year at Baylor, but there's a reason he was number 1 guard before. Dude is a monster in run blocking. Could be one of the better run blocking guards
from Stanford.
He is not David DeCastro, but that does not mean he's not good.
And one last, we didn't talk about any of the tight ends. Obviously, Ebron
is by far
Jason
the best.
Morrow, everyone knows. Austin Safarian-Jenkins, probably the most polarizing tight end prospect in the draft because of his size at 6'7", his speed, but he's currently out with a foot fracture. I really like A.C. Leonard. We both know who Colt Larella is.
I like him.
We both think that he could be the next Aaron Hernandez if he was given the correct opportunity. But that being said, is there anything else you want to say on the draft, guys? Or is there one sidebar guy you forgot to say now that you're on the spot and you've already said your guy?
Well, I said my guy, then you started naming off all these other names, making my previous statement of last name for each of us moot.
Well, you brought up the guards and we didn't bring up the guards, so I wanted to at least get some information out there to somebody who's looking.
Well, you kind of set me up to talk about my third favorite tight end, Jake Murphy out of Utah. Really like him. He shows a lot of talent. 4th round, could be a steal.
All right,
so
sweet.
We're going to take a break. The next podcast will be the mock draft, which we're going to do right away. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully it didn't sound like we're just naming off names like we're reading the dictionary. But the draft's coming up. It's going to be very exciting. This draft is loaded.
Sweet.